What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Scouting the Fins right here on the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast feed, also part of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. The Miami Dolphins have fallen to 1-6, losing to the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland 31-6. This has become an absolute accident of a season. Just like this current Dolphins team, you need to be ready to after an accident. Your first move should be calling 305-800-PAIN. That's right, 305-800-PAIN. Better Business Bureau accredited with an A+ rating. Your car accident personal injury specialist. Fast connection with trusted doctors and attorneys. Always ready to take your call 24/7. Again, 305-800-PAIN, 305-800-PAIN. This show is brought to you by Thompson Cigar today. Man, if I could just watch the film session with one of these Thompson cigars later tonight or tomorrow, maybe I'd feel a little bit better. Use promo code 3yards20 for 20% off your order of $75 or more on thompsoncigar.com. Once again, that's 3yards20 for 20% off your order of $75 or more. I'm joined by my co-host Eric Whittaky for another disappointing yet just not what we expected the Dolphins to do in Cleveland. And it was just awful. Just an awful showing by this team.
You know, I had a feeling they were going to lose this game. I didn't have a feeling it was going to look like this. It's just coming off of the media circus that you had last week following, the comments by Tua and then the backtracking. And I know that a lot of that stuff was taken out of context, but it's just not a great look. Coming off of that and then having a performance like this, again, it just, you never hear about things getting better after players-only meetings when you're 1-5. Things don't get better when your quarterback starts blaming your head coach through the media and your head coach starts blaming your quarterback through the media, which I'm sure we'll talk about because there was more of that today. If you were looking for somebody to blame after this ball game, thank God they were more than willing to tell you who. And it's just, again, it's just the word is dysfunction. That's what it is. And it's there at every level of the organization right now. And it's really, it makes for a bleaker picture than maybe actually is there, because it's so hard to evaluate your younger players and guys that maybe want to bring into 2026 and beyond when they're just kind of surrounded by all of this, whatever this is. Because no players look good in these environments. And again, it just comes down to whether, I don't care if it's the quarterback's fault. I don't care if it's the head coach's fault. Tua and McDaniel are a package deal. And to see them try to throw each of them is trying to detach themselves from the other. And it's not possible. It's not possible. You guys were singing each other's praises to the highest degree 2 or 3 years ago. We've had at least these operational issues to some extent for the entire McDaniel era. And Tua wasn't talking about it when he was having success, but last year he started with it because it wasn't as good as he was in 2022, 2023, and this year has continued because the performance has been bad. But, it's just, it rings a little bit hollow because it wasn't proactive. There wasn't, hey, yeah, we're really good right now, but these are the things we need to get better at. It was, yeah, well, Mike just runs a great offense, and it was just a lot of that stuff. And you look at what this team is now today, I don't see a way anyone comes out of this unscathed. It feels like we're approaching a scorched earth week, really. Mike McDaniel talked about evaluating the depth chart. Brother, I don't know if you're going to be the one doing that evaluation. You can't lose this game in Cleveland like this and expect nothing to happen. I mean, I don't know if it's too drastic to say that I expect changes to be made this week, but I would be far from surprised if that was the case.
Yeah, we'll get into a little bit more in depth and detail once Coach joins the show. This wasn't just another loss for the Dolphins; it was a full on unraveling of the dysfunction this team has had for 4 years. I mean, you can say for at least the last 25 years, this Dolphins team has been absolutely dysfunctional, right? The Dolphins were outgained, they were out tough, they were out executed. Cleveland's offense with a rookie backup quarterback, missing an offensive lineman, they were able to put 17 points on this Dolphins defense. I felt like if Cleveland had a competent enough quarterback, they would have blown this team out of the water at least 42 to 45 points. Just seeing that first half made me feel very queasy because the Dolphins offense really only had 10 minutes to possess the ball. Meanwhile, the Browns offense had around 21 minutes to possess the ball in the first half, and the Browns only put up 17 points. You know, they had a turnover from D. Eskridge, who lost the fumble that led them to get a touchdown. Quinshon Judkins in the Wildcat formation as well. The Dolphins' defense in the second half was able to clamp down a little bit. The offense just couldn't get anything going. Uh, and I'll continue to say this. Mike McDaniel was a run game guru in San Francisco. He has not been able to have that commitment to running the ball. I felt like if he ran the ball a little bit more in the first half, the Dolphins would not have been in the position where they would have been down by 2 to maybe even 3 scores in the first half. The first couple plays of the first drive were really going, and then he started to pass using the screens, the swing passes, screens once again when, the offensive line was getting penalties just to gain some key yardage. But these things have to get out of the playbook, and it just needs to be better. You can't just run the same old and expect completely different results. We're in year 4 of this Mike McDaniel offense with Tua at the helm. And we'll get to the post-game comments a little bit later on, but as things go on, nothing changes. And it's frustrating to watch. It's frustrating to analyze. And Cleveland and Jim Schwartz's defense pretty much sniffed it right out of the gate. I mean, it was the pick six, right? Coming out of the second half.
Yep.
That was caught. That very first play in the second half, that same play, that same read is the correct read from Tua Tagovailoa because that is the play call. If the flat player is open, he throws that. Now, albeit he throws it a bit high, but it's the same exact play up against Buffalo where he was picked off at. You're running the same plays. You're thinking the execution will also be the same, but your offensive line is getting pressured. We know Tua does not handle well under pressure. The ball was a little bit too high. Devon Achane had the ball in his hand, in both of his hands. He had fingers on it and slips out of it. And you can see in the play that the defenders were keying onto this flat play. There were 2 Cleveland Browns defenders right there, and it was picked off, returned for a pick six.
Yeah, I mean it's again, you see this offense every single week, and it's the exact same offense every single week. I mean, you can count on throws to the flats, maybe making up 40% of. I mean, I would be very interested to see what the actual percentage is on
I
where
mean,
the
those
throws
throws
are
to the
going.
flats are usually to Devon A-Chain. Last time we were on the podcast, A-Chain was 12 for 12, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns on those flat concepts. But even going back to the first half, right, on the very last drive, Tua threw a perfect ball to Jalen Waddle in the end zone. It hit Waddle right in the hands, and he couldn't come down with it. The Dolphins would be down by maybe a touchdown, 17-10. Had they ran the ball coming out of that second half, gotten some yardage, and potentially gotten a touchdown, the game might have changed a little bit where you can go after Dylan Gabriel. But even when they went after Dylan Gabriel, they couldn't sack him at all. Even with the four-man rush, they couldn't even sack Dylan Gabriel, and everything just right after that pick six just completely unraveled. We have Coach Smith joining us today, who's got a lot of words on Tua and McDaniel and this game. Coach?
Yeah, I don't know what all you guys have covered so far, but this was a failure on all levels. I mean, you come out and started out looking okay, but they kept finding ways to extend drives defensively and give the Browns more opportunities, whether it was late hits, you roughing the quarterback, defensive holding. Right, we're wiping turnovers off of the board, and then you finally they score the touchdown. You think you get the ball back, and then the next thing you know, you fumble the kickoff, right? So then you have the special teams part of it just falling apart, and then your offense isn't on the field until it was probably over halfway through the second quarter before your offense gets on the field for the second time in the game, right? And then so you feel a little bit bad for the offense in that sense that they really didn't have a chance to do anything with it. But then you get to that middle 10-minute period that everybody wants to win between the last 5 minutes of the first half and the first 5 minutes of the second half. And that's, where a game can really turn. And the Dolphins were in a good position to do that and completely blundered that. You come out in the second half and, you should have opportunity to have the offense build some momentum, close that gap, and at least make it interesting at the end. And you throw a freaking pick six on the first play of the second half. So this was the worst game that I can remember watching in a long time, right? This wasn't getting blown out by a good team. The Browns are not a good team, and the Dolphins looked incompetent in every phase. I'm not optimistic that we're going to see changes. When I was watching the Mike McDaniel interview afterwards, I think there should be changes, right? Don't take that the wrong way. But when I'm watching the interview afterwards, it one of two ways for me. One, he was either given some kind of vote of confidence because he looked fairly comfortable in that press conference to me, based on how I feel like I would feel coming out of that game as a coach, or after that pick six early in the second half, there is a point as a coach where you realize that this game's not turning around, right? And the emotions kind of get out of it as you go later in the game. And when you're getting into a backup quarterback situation, that I don't think you're not putting Quinn Ewers in there to try to rally the troops and bring you back for a win at that point. So maybe it was just that the game was so far out of hand that the emotions, he kind of got over that before he got to the podium. But I guess just kind of rubbed me the wrong way that seeing him on the podium just didn't feel like a coach that really, I mean, we're beyond being on the hot seat at this point. Like I don't know how he makes it to the next game, but based on his the way that he came off, I wouldn't be surprised if he's still around.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone from the fastest offense in football to a lost team with no pulse. This team isn't fired up. You can see, at least on the offensive side of things and from the offensive players, there is no life in them. At least from what Bradley Chubb said in the press conference, there was energy going, people were going. I mean, I saw very early on in the first half, Minka Fitzpatrick was hitting his own guys, trying to get him pumped up. The effort from Bradley Chubb, though, I felt like, especially on rundowns, was not there. He was not getting into the running lanes. where he needed to be. Chop Robinson was quickly closing in on Dylan Gabriel, but Dylan Gabriel was getting the ball out quick. Jordan Brooks was coming in hot on tackles. I feel like Ashton Davis played a good game if it wasn't for, that Minka Fitzpatrick penalty, which could have led to an actual interception being called. But man, this offensive staff, offensive coaches, offensive players, no one is stepping up to be a leader. And I'm just going back to Tua's comments from, last game. I know you guys had your comments on that, but it felt like that was a cry from help from Tua saying, like, we're doing these player meetings to help us to get better. Some players are showing up late saying that they're not dedicated. I'm dedicated. You're not dedicated. Coach, I need help here. Like, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
The whole idea though behind it just doesn't rub me the right way when, as the quarterback, there's a reason why it's called a franchise quarterback. It's not a franchise head coach. Although you have had guys like that exist, but those are like your Bill Belichick's of the world and, guys that you associate with the franchises. I don't need my quarterback asking publicly for help. I need my quarterback privately demanding help. Whether that's of the players in the locker room, whether that's of the head coach, I need that stuff to be happening. Number one, where we can't see it. Number two, in a way that doesn't come across as, well, I'm doing my part. Because that's the last thing anyone wants to hear, and it's the last thing that's appropriate when the performance is the performance. And we can talk about all the things around it. And Mike McDaniel certainly isn't blameless. I think he's comfortable in these press conferences because I think I'm at a point where I think he's ambivalent about getting fired. I don't think he cares one way or the other at this point. Yeah, he's clearly not enjoying coaching his football team anymore. So I don't think he cares. He knows he's owed money the rest of the way out. If he gets fired, that's fine by him. Why would he want to continually put up with this? I'd be miserable too if I were him. But it's just, I understand from Tua's perspective how frustrating things can be. But I also think that when you are at a certain level and when you want to be the franchise quarterback, you have to conduct yourself in a certain way, to earn the respect of the guys in that locker room. And I don't think he's gone about it in the right way.
Yeah. Coach, before we get to your point, for those of you guys who are listening on Spotify, we will head to break. And we're back. And for those of you who are watching live on YouTube, just a little quick 1 second. But Coach, just based off your thoughts of last week from what Tua said and from basically the performance from him and the entire offense this week.
Yeah, so Sam, I don't know if it was you that had tweeted this from the 5 Reasons Sports account, but you said, or 5 Reasons Sports had tweeted out that there's a middle ground on Tua. He was better than many gave him credit for a couple of years ago, but he has regressed considerably, and it was obvious in the season opener. He's even more reliant on everything being perfect around him. It's time to seek another option. And I agree completely with that. So, we talk about him demanding players to, attend these, player-led meetings, whatever you want to call it. He's got to step up himself. He's supposed to be a franchise quarterback. You're paying him that way. Franchise quarterbacks are supposed to be able to cover up deficiencies. And Tua did that in the past, and he's not doing it now, right? There was times in the past where
and he even said that in the presser too. He even said that in I don't know if you guys caught it, but I saw it live on YouTube on the Dolphins YouTube. But he even said that, past years, I was able to make do with what I can, but this is this year, and I'm not playing to the standard what it is. Like you hear him hearing that accountability, and even Jalen Phillips said it in the locker room just a few days ago that Tua was right in pretty much calling it out. We hear all of these NFL media personalities saying that Tua shouldn't have done that, but you hear it from Teddy Bruschi, who is a championship winning NFL linebacker, saying that having him say that is saying that the coach isn't giving the help. Why is it that they are having these player led film meetings if maybe it's not enough? Like, coach, do you have these player level meetings in college or even if in high school if the coaches are not helping you or you're not getting that help?
And we're obviously talking about a different level of sophistication. We're talking high school
Yeah.
versus NFL. I think that most of the times players that in high school where I'm coaching, they're going to seek the coach's opinion on stuff. When you get to the NFL, these guys have been at it for a long time individually, so their opinions are a little more sophisticated the way they work through things. But there are players that get together and do off-season workouts, have discussions, like maybe not formal sit down, we're going to take attendance type deals like it sounds like the Dolphins are trying to do. But I just think that I don't think there's anything wrong with Tua said. Certainly, maybe how he said it, maybe it should have been kept in house. But the problem with that is that when it's your highest paid player demanding this from other players, but that player is not making the improvements from week to week that he's expecting everybody else to, it kind of falls on deaf ears. And one of the things that I kind of noticed today, and I've noticed it in the past, like, and I don't know, for the most part, I understand the pass blocking schemes in the NFL, right? And once the ball snapped, what happens? I feel like I can translate that pretty well. But there's a little bit of a gap for me in terms of who's responsible for that pre-snap. Is it completely on the quarterback? Is it the center? Is it a combination, right? Is it part of the play call? Because whatever that is severely broken for the Dolphins this year. Like there are so many pressures, some of these interceptions, some of these sacks that are not, I don't want to excuse the offensive line. The offensive line has played bad. These guards are way worse than what they were last year, despite everybody thinking that last year was as bad as it could be. They're really showing that there's more to it. But it's not even the issues physically. The players just losing reps are less of an issue than the fact that we just end up with free rushers coming through. And like at some point, you got to figure that shit out. Like we can't just go into every single game and we've got an A gap or a B gap pressure, right? We end up with Myles Garrett getting a completely free run through the A gap. Like how does that happen? So those are the kind of questions. And like I said, I don't know if that falls on Tua, right? And if it does, then it's like, you're your own worst enemy in that sense, right? You got to get the ball out quickly. You got to at least get guys into the right spot to at least, be able to make some sort of effort. But the way that the Dolphins are pass blocking right now, they're not even going to the right spot to have a chance at it. So I think that, I don't worry so much about the meetings. I don't think that's completely uncommon. I mean, I think that position groups throughout the NFL probably have some sort of meetings. Maybe it's not a formal, hey, we need to sit down in a classroom and do it as a group type deal. But I do think that there's plenty of teams that, maybe, let's say last year, right? Teron Armstead, Patrick Paul, Austin Jackson all get together and sit down and watch film together. So that's, a group of players getting together, having player-led meetings, player-led film sessions, but it's not saying, hey, everybody on the offensive line, we're not getting enough from Butch Berry. We need to sit down and we need to have our own film session. So I'm not sure where all of that falls. I'm not sure that we'll ever really know how much that is.
Yeah, you talk about the free rushers. That second interception Tua threw, that was basically a fire zone blitz where they had uh, brought in the sim pressure, what it looked to be like a sim pressure, but they had only rushed 4 passers. And that sim pressure was the linebacker coming straight through the B gap nearby Cole Strange's area. I felt like if Tua had a little bit of time, he might have thrown, a deeper hole shot, but he was just getting pressured. And if he had ran around or gotten sacked, it would have been a safety. So either way, it was just a lose-lose situation. And coach, you're talking about the operation of this offensive line year after year after year. And Eric, we've talked about it so many times, but it was really noticeable the third year in this Mike McDaniel offense where the play clock was less than 10 seconds. They were motioning, they couldn't get it set up. This year, the Dolphins haven't had a lot of pre-snap penalties or motion issues, but the performance of the play right after the operation has been bad. Here's what Tua Tagovailoa has to say about this operation, and it kind of gives a hint of what's truly going on in the offensive game plan, the operation, and what he thinks of this offense.
Just trying to maneuver everything and trying to build a collection of guys to kind of bring along with me.
All right, looks like we can't necessarily hear, but Chris Kaufman is basically saying that, summarizing that Tua is saying he's having trouble doing the job of the quarterback and the head coach at the same time. That multitask remark of him saying that is basically saying he's trying to get guys lined up properly. He's making sure the time clock is okay. He's making sure the play is incorrect and everyone is understanding. And also he's talking about managing the guys in the locker room, managing all the different personalities and making sure everyone has their head on straight. He says in previous years, he was able to do that. He was able to multitask, but this year he's not able to. So what changed from the last 2 years to now? Is it a Tua thing? Is it a McDaniel thing? Is the player-led locker room not really player-led? Is the coaching staff or Mike McDaniel, as you said, Coach, does Coach McDaniel not care anymore? Eric, what are your thoughts? And then Coach will get to you.
I think, like with many things, it's probably a combination of a multitude of factors. I think that there's clearly locker room issues. I don't think you can sit here and say with a straight face that this team is all good, A-okay. No, they are not. They can say that these player-led meetings were all film sessions, but 99% of the time in the history of the NFL, when we hear players-only meetings, it is a clearing of the air, whether that's miscommunications on the field that are a result of bad relationships in the locker room or what have you. Those are very real factors. And I think that those are some factors that are at play here in Miami, because it was talked about how much Tyreek Hill was having to kind of do his redemption and he's got to prove himself to us. I just, it makes me question again the entire just strength of the locker room from that perspective. But getting to Mike McDaniel, I think McDaniel has been too deferential to his players for the entirety of his tenure. And that worked early on because I think when he first came into the locker room, it was kind of a breath of fresh air. It was, hey, this guy's giving us autonomy. He's treating us like adults. And then all of a sudden, when adversity hit and Mike McDaniel had the opportunity to lead, he had kind of passed the buck on to his leaders. And it came to a point where I think, players started to get the impression that, well, Mike isn't just letting us, be leaders, and he's not letting us have this opportunity because he trusts us as men to run the locker room. No, he's giving us this opportunity because he can't do it himself. And that's where I think the most damning thing of this all comes is they looked at Mike McDaniel and all of a sudden it became instead of a guy that, yeah, I can have the control if I want to, but I'm giving it to you, to, no, here, you take it. I don't know what to do with this. So it comes out again also in the operation of the plays. And from Tua's perspective, this is where 6 years in, you have your contract, you're established in the league. I have to imagine he has some sort of agency in this offense to where if Mike McDaniel can't get a play in time, or the operation, something's wrong with the operation, Tua's got to have a menu of options that he can go to. And that's where I kind of want my franchise quarterback to kind of say, hey, no, we're not going to do this. I'm going to take control. This is going to be how it's going to be run. Mike, figure it out in the background. And it just kind of feels like those two guys have been trying to defer to each other. And now that's, I think, where we have a lot of the finger pointing going back and forth.
Yeah, it seems like a public punching match in the media from these last 2 to 3 press conferences. And I feel like with Mike McDaniel, the biggest failure is not his playbook, is that he never defined what it means to be a Miami Dolphin. And with Tua Tagovailoa, it's him not taking that extra step to actually be the franchise quarterback this team so desperately has needed since post Marino. Coach?
Yeah, I think you guys, really hit the nail on the head just to get, hit on a couple of topics that Eric had there. Number one, I don't know how much control of this offense that Tua has. There was some stuff in the past with Kyle Shanahan about how when he went to Atlanta, there was some friction there between Kyle and Matt Ryan at that time because, the Mike Shanahan version of the offense, the original Kyle Shanahan version, really didn't give the quarterback a whole lot of flexibility. It was more like, here's a play call, here's something that you can to, right, an alternate play, but you really didn't have, an open playbook at the line of scrimmage. And then when they got to Atlanta, Matt Ryan, a vet at that point, really butted heads with Kyle Shanahan, and they were able to find a bit of a middle ground there. So I don't know what it is with Mike and Tua, right? Is it that Mike is only giving him a play to can to, or does Tua have a little more autonomy at the line of scrimmage to make those calls? I don't know where that lands. And then Eric also talked about, the whole Tyreek Hill thing, the redemption thing. One of the things that kind of rubbed me the wrong way from the beginning is that, they talked about Tyreek needing to earn his respect back from the teammates, earn his place back as a leader. And, sure, they didn't give him, a captain patch at the beginning of the season, but you go back to week 1 and the pregame huddle there as they're on the field, ready to start the game. And who's the guy that they put in the middle to give the pep talk, right? It's Tyreek Hill again, right? How did he come back in week 1 and he's already the guy in the middle of the entire team trying to get you pumped up? So that one kind of rubbed me the wrong way too. And I think that Eric really, when you were talking about the way that Mike McDaniel came in and, or is telling the players, I want this to be a player-led locker room. I think that really did empower them early in Mike McDaniel's tenure. And, probably the entire locker room was like, yeah, we want to do this. We want this to work. We want the players to lead. And then we didn't get the results, right? Had we come out and the spending spree early had resulted in a Super Bowl, right, then maybe you could have built that foundation where you could have continued that. But I think that when you ended up with the injuries and the struggles and the failure to win a playoff game that we got out of that, then, some players kind of start to break off from that and they don't feel that same empowerment. And then you get that resentment from players that feel like they're doing more than other players. And then we get to where we are now, where it feels like some of those players are looking to Mike to be like, hey, we need to do this or that to get back on track. And Mike, when he talked about the player-led meeting, he's like, well, I'm off the clock at that point. Like that's outside of my umbrella, or however he put it, where, it feels like guys like Tua are asking him for help to lead, to say this is how we need to do things, and they're just not getting it. So I don't think there is a clear direction, like you said, Eric, on what it means to be a Miami Dolphin. Because, when you give the players the the freedom to be a player-led team, but there's never a structure for what that looks like, then you're gonna have, pockets of players that see it one way. You got one pocket of players that says, as long as I'm showing up and doing stuff on the field correctly, it doesn't matter what extra work I do or what I do with these other players. And then you have another group that's like, hey, we need to be doing extra all the time to get everybody on the same page. And then, of course, you got the other ones that are like, this sucks. I'm not going to do, I'm going to do bare minimum. I'm here so I don't get fined, right? I think that's kind of where we are. That Mike McDaniel's failure to take control of this situation has resulted in a very fragmented group of players that are looking at things very differently. And when you have certain players that that want to make this better, that want to make this succeed, but you're not getting buy-in from the entire team, and you're not getting a head coach that's enforcing it, then I think you end up with what we have today, which nobody wants to see.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the play on the field. It tells the same story every week. You see the talent, you see the speed, you see them trying, but you don't see the structure. And when there's no structure, I mean, Coach, you said it, you get what we saw against Cleveland, 31-6 and no fight. And this gets me to my last point about what Coach McDaniel said in the presser after the game. He was pretty much talking about players negatively affecting the team and assessing different players in this situation. For all this talk about Tua subtly calling Mike McDaniel and the offensive staff and coaching staff in the media, I think Mike McDaniel pretty much says it and is calling out Tua right there. Like, the cracks in their relationship are now very, very public. Mike pretty much says players' frustrations prevented us from executing today. If that was the game plan and what Patrick Paul said is true, that the game plan was good, we just didn't execute. If that game plan was supposed to be perfect, I don't think that was a good game plan to start off with. You start off with a couple of runs that were going well, then you start passing the ball. If you're running the ball and you're running the ball well, why would you go away from it? Why would you deviate from it? Time and time again, we see them running the ball well, deviate from it, and all things just go straight to hell. Why is this an actual thing? Eric, Coach?
We've been asking this question now for the better part of 3 or 4 years here with McDaniel and the commitment to the running game. Just getting back to McDaniel's comments about the players negatively impacting the team and evaluating guys' performances, it really just kind of rings hollow. It reads as too little, too late for you to kind of become the tough guy here up at the podium and talk about how we're gonna make changes in the depth chart and I'm gonna evaluate who my starters are. It feels like he's kind of gotten to that point where he's kind of reached his breaking point, and I really kind of wish he would have gotten to that point maybe a year and a half ago at this point, because I think he's needed some of that for a long time. But at this point, it feels like it's a little too late here. And I think going about it publicly, especially after the way, he's presented himself the first 2-3 years of his tenure, isn't the right way to go about it either. But, this is what you've gotten from Mike McDaniel for the better part of 4 seasons, is we've known that there's been issues with a commitment to the run game. And I don't think that should come as a surprise to anybody at this point. And Patrick Paul's comments, to me, indicate a slightly, well, not even a slightly bigger problem. I think it's a problem that we know exists already, and that is players are picking sides. You're either Team McDaniel or you're Team Tua. And, and it's clear as day that that's part of what's going on here, and that's going to be part of what's going on until one or both of those guys, unfortunately, are removed from the equation. Because when you get to that point, it doesn't really get better. Without these guys seriously having some sort of communication face to face with each other, honestly, I don't know what that looks like. Clearly, their communication isn't very good right now because they're talking to each other through the media. So I don't know what that ends up looking like, but we've known Mike McDaniel has had these game plan issues for a long time now. I think it's a little late to start with the whole disciplinarian. I'm going to start making changes to the Depth Chart Act. I think that's stuff that should have been addressed year and a half ago at this point.
Yeah, and what if that is Tua that he's talking about with those comments, and it definitely feels like it is. Like, what are you going to do? Like, you're going to put Zach Wilson in there? Zach Wilson couldn't even beat Quinn Ewers to be the number 2 quarterback today, right? You put Quinn Ewers in today, and he's not ready, right? He almost threw a pick 6 of his own on his first attempt, and then gave Jalen Waddle a hospital ball, just a pass or two later after that, right? So this problem, like Eric said, is not a this year problem. You have avoided putting, I don't want to say legitimate competition, right? Because Tua was your QB1, right? But you have avoided really pursuing the backup quarterback position. And that's what happens when you get to where we are now, is that even if you want to bench Tua, right, even if there is that fragmentation between McDaniel and Tua, what are you going to do, right? You're going to go, see if the Bengals want to give up Joe Flacco and let him finish the season like that. That would be a better option than going with Zach Wilson or Quinn Ewers for the rest of the year. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is there. And Hassam, to your question about abandoning the run, it's Mike McDaniel. Like it's as simple as that. Like Eric said, this has been a problem for years, and it's every couple of weeks feels like he's making progress, and then the next week it's like throw it all out the window, right? Hit a little bit of adversity, have the opportunity to show that you're changing your colors, and you go right back to the exact same stuff that you're doing. And the problem with that is the play caller is that your play caller is your head coach. So there is nobody to come to him and say, Mike, run the damn ball, right? There is nobody to do that. So, Mike has shown that he's going to continue to do the same things over and over again. He's always been very slow to change. And, this one just seems like it's never going to change long term.
Yeah, lots of issues within this Dolphins organization. You can talk about the personnel decisions since 2016 with Chris Greer. We never really touched on that topic, but that's for another show. But in the outcome of this very likely divorce, who does this Dolphins organization pick? Eric, you alluded to it. Is it Team McDaniel? Is it Team Tua? There's obviously going to be an option. Maybe both of those guys, including Greer, are not here at the end of the year, but it's a benching for Tua is a potential possibility, or Mike McDaniel is let go.
So I can give you a short-term answer to this, and I can give you a long-term answer to this. My short-term answer to this is that Tua is the choice to stay, but that's for financial reasons. Because of his contract, the way that it's set up. And I know that it's not as atrocious to cut him post June 1st this offseason, but I don't know if they'll go that route just yet. I think Mike McDaniel probably does not make the season at the current rate. But I don't think, if you were to ask me if either of those two guys are a part of the organization at the start of 2027, my answer right now is no.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you can move away from Tua right now because, like I said, with where you are with the quarterback situation. So it's not necessarily that you're choosing Tua over McDaniel. It's that it all needs to go. We need to, find out what's behind door number 3. Try something different, right? Because the definition of insanity, we all know what that is. So I think we got to do something different. Starts with firing Mike McDaniel, and then it starts with, even if you're not moving on from Tua next year for financial reasons, then it is building that plan to replace him, whether it's a highly drafted quarterback next year, or whether it's the fire sale where you accumulate the picks and get ready for the following draft when you're comfortably out of the Tua contract. So I think that we have a long road ahead of us until this team is going to be competitive again. But got to finish out this season, and I don't think that Mike McDaniel makes it very much further into that. And then how Tua performs after that, I think will depend on how far he makes it after that.
Yeah, we'll see what happens come Monday morning. We'll see if any personnel changes happen after that. It's on to Atlanta, who's very, very hot at this moment. Well, as always, y'all, thank you so much for sticking with us here on Scouting the Fins, part of the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast feed, also part of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. As always, y'all, go Fins.